are a few things in life that you never want to experience. For example, you don't want someone to knock on your door and you open it and just get punched in the face. Even if you were having the best 24 hours in your life, all you're going to do is sit down and go, well, why the hell did that happen? And you're never going to know, and then you're going to cry. And nobody wants that. I feel sorry for you already. But another thing that we don't really want to see is riots in any walk of life, but especially when it comes to professional wrestling. But back in the day, however, when maybe fans were more ready to believe what they were seeing in front of their two eyes, this did happen, and if you can believe, it happened quite a lot. And that's why I'm here today, Simon for What Culture, to run you through 10 wrestling matches, that actually started riots. Number 10, The Outsiders are the mystery partner taking on Sting, Lex Luger, and Randy Savage. Coming at the Bash to the Beach 1996, you don't even need me to tell you about this, because you already know. Hulk Hogan joining the Outsiders and turning heel onto the wrestling community shocked the universe so much that even fans watching for a few seconds when I clearly have just fallen asleep and hallucinated, Hulk Hogan's not a villain, what the hell just happened? I mean, don't forget this as well. It was so unexpected that even when Hulk Hogan came out here, seemingly to help the good guys, nobody went, well, he's clearly got to be the mystery partner. If you did that in 2021, everyone would know, but this was Hulk Hogan, and he was good to his core. At least in the sense of a wrestling character. So we were all idiots, but it does come down to the amount of time he had spent eating his vitamins and saying his prayers. And when he did drop that leg over Randy Savage's neck, the audience went ballistic. Because they littered the square circle with rubbish and beer cups and whatever they could find, and some of them were so wound up, they tried to actually get in the ring before Kevin Nash booted them right in the head. And while this wasn't as nuts as riots from the older days, this wasn't happening in 1996. In the mid-90s, no one saw it coming. It did kind of help though, and it sent a message that something huge had just gone down. And my word, was that true. Number 9, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Dude Love versus Triple H and Shawn Michaels. If you were at the Little Rock, Arkansas show in December 1997, you also witnessed one of the most bonkers riots in modern pro wrestling memory. Stemming from the crazy hatred that Shawn Michaels was getting, given that he had just screwed over Bret the Hitman Hart, and was also like crotching at his chop as he started to slowly form D-Generation X, the real problem was that nobody in the crowd knew this was a house show, because that's not what they had been told. Because all of the advertising suggested otherwise, and even The Rock had gone on local radio and TV and gone, hey, make sure you come down to Little Rock, Arkansas on this date so you can lay witness to Monday Night Raw. And then we all sat down, and it wasn't Monday Night Raw at all. That had been recorded the week before. Officials were able to calm everything down, but when we got to the main event and something hit Shawn Michaels that had obviously been thrown from the audience, he decided, well, I don't want none of this. He left. That was just too much. Fans almost instantly started fighting and even started setting fire to things, and the police were called in and actually had to try and stop all of this using tear gas. And there were arrests. People were actually arrested. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't see that happening in the Thunderdome. Number 8, Bad News Allen, Archie Goldie and Jeff Goldie taking on Sonny Two Rivers and Bret and Owen Hart. The 2nd of December 1983 Stampede Wrestling show kind of served as the event that put the final nail in the promotion's coffin. Bruce Hart was kind of running things at this stage, and he had decided to go back to when Stampede was all brutal and violent. As it turned out, that wasn't the best idea. Because this 6-man main event took a terrible turn when Bad News Allen turned on Jeff, which also didn't work out too well for Stomper Archie Goldie, because Jeff, in the world of kayfabe, was his son. Attacking him outside the ring, Allen must have pile-dried him 45,789 times into the mat before he told both of them that he thought they were stupid and he hated them, and then finished it off by saying, you know what? I want you dead. This was the tipping point for the fans, who started to go absolutely crazy, and it got so bad, one poor woman was even trampled. That should never be happening. It escalated so quickly that Ed Whelan, the commentator, quit live on air, which is something he had wanted to do for a while because he didn't appreciate the direction things were going in. And the real kicker was that it led to numerous sanctions coming down on Stampede Wrestling, the worst one being that they're not allowed to run shows for another 6 months. Jump forward a year, and Vince McMahon would buy them, and that was that. Number 7, Ric Flair versus Nikita Koloff. In September of 1985, the NWA was on fire. Not literally, people just liked what they were doing. Because of that though, fans had well and truly bought in, which brings us to one fateful night in Atlanta. For you see, as Ric Flair battled Nikita Koloff for the NWA heavyweight title in a steel cage, he won. Because of course he won, and then after the fact Nikita Koloff attacked him, because of course he did it with Ivan Koloff, That's just what happened back then. Thankfully, Dusty Rhodes had seen all of this and he came out to help the Nature Boy. But then Arn and Ole Anderson had also been watching on from afar, and along with Ric Flair, they started to beat up the American Dream, and nobody could believe it. Because those live were furious that their hero had been double-crossed in this way, and seriously, when you watch this, if it wasn't for the steel cage, I am 99% sure everyone would have just piled in there and beat him up. This was, of course, the slow formation of the Four Horsemen, and my word, did they know how to wind people up, and I'm pretty sure if somebody had some kind of bolt cutters, they would have cut into the steel and probably just killed them. Thankfully, eventually they did get their revenge, because a couple of months later, Dusty Rhodes beat Ric Flair for that same NWA title. Number 6, Vader versus Inoki. I mean, this one was always going to explode. You could take John Cena or Hulk Hogan or anyone you deem to be a top star that never lost, and times that by 92,000 when it comes to Antonio Inoki. He was a hero, a legend, and a victor, and every single person loved everything he did. He earned all of this by being an all-time great, but he also did it by protecting himself and rarely ever losing. You remember when The Undertaker lost at WrestleMania 30? I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. That was nothing compared to what would happen when Inoki's shoulders were pinned to the mat. Now, the reason he was able to do this is because nobody in the crowd actually wanted to see him lose, and if you want evidence of that, December 27th, 1987. Because Vader walked into the company and handed Inoki only his first loss in 2 years and only his second in the preceding 10. Now, fair play to Antonio, because this was exactly his plan. He realized that his superhero act was eventually wear thin, so somebody needed to come in and absolutely destroy him. And so he picked Vader, obviously. He even told the Mastodon to try and break his nose, and when Vader got the 1, 2, 3, you could hear audible gasps in the crowd. And then when he continued to beat on Inoki after the fact, well, that was too much. Even though Japanese fans are usually incredibly respectful, they turned vicious here and once again started setting things on fire. Why do we always go back to flames? Vader was escorted out of the building ASAP, and it took police around about 1 hour to calm things down, and New Japan got banned from Sumo Hall for the following 2 years. Whoops. Number 5, the British Bulldog versus Shawn Michaels. Over to my shores now on this horror show that went down in 1997. Let's just tell the story as best we can. Because on this evening, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, was scheduled to defend his European Championship against Shawn Michaels and come away with the gold. Of course he was. We absolutely loved him over here. And because this was the plan, Davey Boy had gone on TV and dedicated this match to his terminally ill sister, Tracy. As we all know, though, the Heartbreak Kid in the 90s wasn't exactly the easiest dude to get on with, so he went to Vince McMahon at last minute and convinced him to change all of this, meaning yes, at the end of the pay-per-view, so we spent money on it, he was the champion, and Bulldog was just lying there like a goof. The Birmingham crowd hated it and started filling up the ring with litter as security guards was all like, wait a minute, we better keep our eye on this. And then Michaels made it even worse when he cut a post-match promo, and my word did he pod the bear. But really, this was just a bad idea all around, and 11,000 people were well aware of it. Number 4, the Midnight Express versus the Rock and Roll Express. All the flipping time. Seriously. And you can't just pick one right because they just kept on happening. This was probably because on the one hand, you had the Midnight Express who were two absolute dicks, but on the other, you had the Rock and Roll Express who would take your nan out for a nice slap-up dinner, get her home in time for bed, and probably even tuck her in. So for this reason and many more, it was just one of the best rivalries ever, and Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson were so good at selling tickets and getting people to come to their matches that the rumor is even Dusty Rhodes got a little bit jealous. When things would go bad, fans would try to rush the ring and punch the Midnight Express right in the face, but when things were good, this was wrestling gold. Number 3, the Dudley Boys versus Spike Dudley and Balls Mahoney. ECW was always going to be in here somewhere because that fan base was among the most passionate in wrestling history. When you throw Bubba Ray Dudley into that mix, and a very motivated one at that, but he just knew how to wind people up. And he would do this in WWE and TNA too, but his version in Extreme Championship Wrestling was something else entirely, and it kind of felt like his sole existence was to piss off the fan. He also crossed the line a lot. One famous example was at the Heatwave pay-per-view in 1998. The Dudley Boys were going to defend their tag team championships against Balls Mahoney and Spike Dudley, but beforehand, the champions decided they would address the audience. For starters, Devon told them to shut the fuck up before Bubba went in there and said, I can't stand being in this piece of shit city. And then he started pointing out individual people in the crowd and telling them what they thought. And I can't repeat those words here. We'd probably get kicked off YouTube. Bubba then said he wanted to start a fight, and that was that. Everything went bonkers. Another story says that 40 police officers had to get involved after Bubba Ray actually did punch a fan. But this is just ECW. Number 2, Roddy Piper versus everyone. Roddy Rowdy Piper may have generated more heat than anybody in wrestling ever. Now, a lot of the tactics he used to do this would not fly today, and nor should they, but if you are looking through the record book trying to find someone who pissed every single person off, well, you're looking for Roddy Rowdy Piper. Before his tragic death, Roddy would admit he would do whatever was necessary to get people to hate him. Although viewed through a modern lens, this is probably a lot of material that wouldn't and shouldn't have been tolerated. I mean, we were literally just talking about crossing the line. Sometimes it's okay to stay on the other side. Still, in terms of pissing people off, Roddy could do it better than no other, and a classic example of that is when he went down to Puerto Rico. He had managed to get everybody into such a stupor, they threatened him with knives, broken beer bottles, and who knows what the hell else. It got so bad that the police had to help him get out of the building, especially because the fans that night thought, well, if we rush the dressing room, maybe we can get a piece of Roddy Rowdy Piper. It was also that time when he was in Los Angeles and he promised the crowd that he was going to play the Mexican national anthem on his bagpipes. Instead, he played La Cucaracha. Number 1, Ernie Ladd versus Johnny Powers. The 31st of January 1974, Cleveland, Ohio, steel belt wrestling. Let's go. Probably the most infamous riot in pro wrestling history, this one was sparked by what somebody else did. Ernie Ladd was taking on Johnny Powers, hoping to break his power lock submission and win $5,000. When Ox Baker decided, I'm gonna go and get involved. Just as it seemed Ladd was gonna get out of this hold, Baker appeared from nowhere and gave him a few heart punches, and people back then believed that move. They thought it was gonna give you a heart attack. And this caused actual shrieks of terror from the audience, who then realized, Shib, we better go help out. This got so intense and so bad that Johnny Powers actually had to run for his life, and you can bet your ass he's glad he did. Fans chased him away while throwing whatever the hell they could find, and it's the sheer noise here that will get you. People just start screaming, and they do not shut up. Thankfully, things did calm down after a little bit, but this would have been the equivalent of that wide-eyed guy at WrestleMania 30 rushing Brock Lesnar after he had beaten the dead man. And nobody would do that. You would be an absolute loon. Now, if you know of any other wrestling riots, make sure you get in those comments and start talking about them, and also like the video, share the video, and please do subscribe. Then you can read articles like this on What Culture Wrestling. You can watch more videos here on the channel. There's videos around my head right now, and if you go to social media and search for What Culture, you will find us. My name is Simon for What Culture. Thank you for joining me as always. I'll see you on the next one.